Ladies and gentlemen, today is January 18th, 2026, and we are here to talk about the world, current events, foreign policy, economics, you name it. We'll talk about it in another episode of World Discussion with Agent Smith.
Hello, how are you?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, how are you?
Very good. How are you?
Oh, can't complain.
Well, some people
Getting
can.
used to my new schedule. Kind of
Oh.
had to shift things around. Case in point,
There's a
I
walkie-talkie?
had a relative. It is actually. I had a relative who injured their back, and so I've been kind of doing the at-home nurse thing. So we
Oh, I
got the
see.
radios so we could stay in contact.
Nice. Good of you to help.
So that's kind of shifted my schedule a little bit, but other than that, can't complain.
Well, I hope they recover as quickly as possible. I'm grateful that I have internet and power. We lost power those few days, like a month ago, so every day that stuff works is just a blessing. Love that. And my brother works at a breakfast restaurant. Made pancakes. I have some of them right now. Very good.
Oh, nice.
On top of that, I got free unsolicited Dota coaching. I got insanely good notes. It's really good. I'm actually going to send it to you just for your amusement. You don't have to read the whole thing, just the structure of how they wrote out the post. It's very professional. So, a lot of people, they don't like backseating when they're trying to play a video game like Dota. But if someone is giving you legit critique of moves that could have been made better or things that could have happened at a better time, it's very refreshing. I love that, because when you're the gamer, you're the one who's steering the character or the faction if you're playing an RTS or something. And in that moment, you have to focus on a lot of mechanics, pushing the right buttons in the right order at the right time, which is very unforgiving. And it's hard to also think through the logic of the match and the strategy for how your team wins at the same time when you're kind of being badgered by enemies who are trying to check your mechanics and make you mess up. So it's awesome. The 3 takeaways that I need to focus on would be prioritizing the health of my towers more. Like just looking at the state of the towers and communicating with my team when we can defend them. Because the longer you hold your towers, the more space you have on the map. And the towers are difficult for the enemy team to overcome because they're defensive abilities that you can use on the towers, and they're just really tanky. So being active defending towers and also paying attention to my team's tempo. In Dota you have different ultimate abilities, and those have a huge impact on fights. And they have sometimes long cooldowns, so the timing that your team should be showing up at fights should be in line with when those ultimate abilities come online. So I haven't been super good about communicating that with my team. Anyone can basically take charge and be team captain in terms of deciding when and where objectives and fights are taken. So because I play carry, I can kind of look at the minimap the most, because my mechanics job becomes simpler once I start hitting neutrals. I'm not really focusing on landing spells on enemy heroes and dodging stuff. I'm fighting neutral camps. They can't fight back as much. So, yep, the tempo is another factor. And then another one was basically how to save a shit game, like where your team is just getting destroyed, it's not close. If it's pretty close, normally you can farm while the enemy carry farms and your team takes decent back and forth fights. But in the game that I played today, the score was 10-2 really early on, so my team was definitely getting owned. And they were saying that I should basically show up at the moment of my team's greatest strength, like when they all have their spells available and they're taking a defensive fight, for example. That would be a really good time for me to just be farming behind where the team is, so I can, within like 3 to 5 seconds, I could walk over and join the fight if I wanted to. I'm not sticking my neck out and diving into the fray and trying to change the outcome. I'm just gaining value on the map in the closest spot to my team that I can for the time. So that was really awesome. Thank you, Dendy, for the notes, randomly. They said that they were a person who's played a lot of Dota, has done coaching, but was currently a bit burnt out on actually playing, but they had fun watching, so they were just helpful. It's like, oh, sweet. Love that.
Yeah, that's one of the fun things about streaming. You never know who you're going to encounter.
Mm-hmm. Blessed are those who give legitimate and good feedback. That includes you, Agent Smith listeners and viewers. Good job. Keep it up. Well, this week in terms of just the banter of what I guess got it into what I've seen. Greenland. Are the United States going to invade Greenland? That's probably big item number one.
No, probably. You never really can tell with this administration, but my intuition is that they're not really seriously threatening to invade. Yeah, I think, we've talked before about how the Trump administration's preferred strategy is just to do flashy, dramatic shit and then see if they get anything out of it. Shaking the tree to see what falls out. So this is kind of part of that playbook. Yeah, their strategy for now, in so much as they have one anyway, seems to be threatening tariffs. Had you heard about this?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the new thing. I still don't know how seriously they're actually taking this. And that's actually kind of part of what European nations are debating right now. Like, is this a serious attempt by the United States to try to extract Greenland? If it is, then they need to respond somehow, probably with something more substantive than less. But if this is just some passing fad that's going to disappear in a few weeks, they really don't have to do anything. Mm-hmm. They can just kind of sit on their hands and wait for it to blow over.
Yeah, and in one of our previous discussions, you talked about how it's not even really a great prize strategically or economically, because to harvest the resources there it's very difficult. It's a super cold and hostile Arctic climate. Like, it's not despite the name, it's not a really nice place to chill and set up a base. So in that sense, it's not really something that other countries are contesting either. And then what else? Well, the US and Denmark are allies, so we actually are obligated to try and protect them. So for us to attack them would not only be like neglecting them when they were attacked, it would be like the complete opposite of now we are attacking them. Mm-hmm. And taking territory like that is a direct act of war, no?
Correct.
Yeah.
More to the point, the US already has a military base in Greenland and can send more forces into Greenland as it likes. So everything the United States wants out of Greenland, it already has. There's nothing new to be acquired there.
There are already dudes at a base chilling like, what?
Yeah, it's, as we've discussed before, it's all pretty nonsensical and non sequitur. So I won't rehash all of that again. Mm-hmm. But the tariff thing is the new strategy for the Trump administration. The Europeans, for their part, are a little bit split as to what to do. It will surprise nobody to know that the French government is the most hawkish. Mm-hmm. They want to implement retaliatory tariffs, assuming the American tariffs actually ever are implemented anyway, which they may not be. Again, it all depends on how serious Washington is about this. So France wants to go hard. They want to use the European Union's anti-coercion instrument, which is basically a law that allows Europe-wide retaliatory tariffs. Other countries are not so gung-ho. They kind of want to take a wait and see approach. So which of those factions ends up winning out is going to kind of determine whether or not this ends up escalating into a tit for tat, or if the Europeans just kind of let it slide until Trump gets bored, basically, and moves on to the next drama.
Mm. Yeah, because unlike Putin, Trump is not someone who gets fixated on one particular thing for a long period of time. It's more so like, as long as he does something else flashy, then he'll be sated. It doesn't have to be there.
Exactly. I did think it was notable that the tariffs that are being threatened are not being threatened are not going to apply to all countries in the European Union. They're only threatening certain countries in Europe. And so that's an interesting move. I don't know if Washington did that on purpose or not, but if it is on purpose, it's relatively smart, because it does test European solidarity. There's a number of countries that are not going to be that interested necessarily in defending Greenland, certainly if it means confronting the United States. And if they're not being threatened with tariffs, then they don't really have as much to lose by ignoring all of this. But of course, if they do ignore it, then that undermines European solidarity and calls into question the integrity and utility of the European Union. And that, I suspect, will compel them, most likely, if worst comes to worse, to honor any European-wide retaliatory tariffs or other such measures that may be taken. But that is a divisive move by Washington if they did do it on purpose. That is the kind of thing you do when you're trying to break up an opponent that is relatively strong, but has disparate constituent parts that are not necessarily all on the same page. The Soviets used to do shit like that during the Cold War, somewhat ironically. They used to try to divide the United States from Europe in order to kind of undermine the alliance and, ideally, from their perspective, eventually break it up. It was one of the things they did in the 70s when they introduced intermediate range bombers and missiles into the European theater. Those were very explicitly targeting European nations and not the United States. And so it called into question in Europe whether or not the United States would actually defend them if worst came to worse and there was an actual war, since the United States was not really threatened by this new nuclear escalation on the part of Moscow. Ultimately, it ended up being managed, but it was something that was discussed for a while. Europe was definitely shaken by it. So this is a strategy Europe has faced before. They'll probably be able to handle it, but it is a kind of sign of the times that it's Washington doing this now. Other than that, I just had a few minor notes. I don't think Trump has the authority to actually implement these tariffs. It's ultimately going to depend on what specific tool he ends up trying to cite in order to justify them, but I don't think any of them are going to be, legally speaking, very strongly grounded in the law. Not that the Trump administration cares about that, but I suspect when, inevitably, if he does go through with this, it ends up before a judge, they will probably, that is to say, the administration will probably not be able to defend this in court. Now, of course, that'll take like 6 months, so in the meantime, facts on the ground will mean that he'll effectively have been able to get what he wanted, assuming it works. So it doesn't necessarily matter that the courts will eventually shoot it down, but this is another example of an administration breaking a norm. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And the United States government here is setting a precedent that an administration that can get away with something in the short term, if it means getting what they want, can and should do so. And that's going to have dire consequences in the medium to long term health of American political culture, which is exactly why previous presidents have exhibited forbearance when dealing with case studies like this. So institutional rot, to put it another way. We've talked about that before. This is another example. Another thing to consider in the European calculation is that when the United States confronted China earlier in 2025, they ended up in a tit-for-tat series of escalations that saw tariffs, both Chinese and American tariffs, targeting each other, significantly increased to around 150%. And when it reached that level, the Trump administration ultimately called a truce and backed down. And since then, things on that front have been very quiet. So that is evidence for the so-called taco trade. If you don't know what that is, that's taco, an acronym that stands for Trump always chickens out. It is a real trade. You know, people in the markets have talked about this and made bets accordingly. Basically, the Trump administration likes to be belligerent and sometimes will follow through on threats, but whenever there's strong retaliation, they generally end up backing down. They don't always fully withdraw whatever instigated the escalation, but they generally do water it down to varying degrees. Incidentally, this is a big reason why the tariffs have not ended up inhibiting the American economy as much as a lot of people were predicting, because the tariffs, such as they are, have so many exemptions and delays and other mitigating factors that the overall effective tariff is actually only around something like 10 to 12%, I think. So for all of the talk of 25% tariff, 40% tariffs, etc., the actual overall rate, once you include all of the exemptions and other things, is relatively low. And so that has significantly mitigated their impact, and in turn, a lot of the worst expectations of the expected impact of tariffs on the economy did not come to pass. And that's expected to continue to be the case into 2026, assuming the Trump administration continues to chicken out as expected. No telling whether or not that will hold, but we'll see. But if it worked for China to stand up to the Trump administration and instigate this tit-for-tat that eventually goes the distance, Brussels could reasonably assume that they could instigate a similar tit-for-tat escalation and then end up with a much better agreement than if they just rolled over or did nothing. So it's possible you could see tit-for-tat tariffs here if the hawks like Paris kind of get their way and Europe does go hard on this. I don't think that'll happen because in general, European foreign policy tends to be risk averse overall. So probably they'll take the wait and see approach. But if the Trump administration does actually implement the tariff starting, February 1st, you could see some drama there. We'll see. But that is in the cards. I think it's not unreasonable that the Europeans think that they could win a battle in that vein. So unfortunately, we've likely not heard the last of Greenland, despite it being just an utterly stupid foreign policy issue. Yeah, I said last week that the Trump administration and its foreign policy has been getting dumber. That hasn't changed in the past week. No improvement, unfortunately. Hope springs eternal. We'll see where it goes, but for now, it remains insipid.
Well, it all sounds very silly. It's a place with neither resources nor very many people, so nor very good weather.
Yeah, very true. So beyond Greenland, I did have some updates on Venezuela. We've been getting some more details about how all of this is supposed to work, this sort of alleged new arrangement that Washington has with Caracas. So the Venezuelan government recently announced some new reforms, or at least a new reform regarding how they're going to manage foreign ownership of oil. Basically, it's a revision of their hydrocarbon law, and it's going to regard foreign investment, as you might expect. So supposedly, the initial article I read about this when it first announced is that it was going to make it easier for foreign oil companies to invest in the Venezuelan oil sector. So that would be in keeping with the Trump administration's announced objective that they want more American oil companies operating in Venezuela producing oil. However, the details later came out that kind of undermined that message. So what the Venezuelan government is doing here, assuming the earliest announcements and articles were correct in this, I haven't seen any new updates on this in the past couple of days. But the details of the change in the oil law are that foreign investment will be allowed to flow freely into the following: new oil fields, fields where no investment has ever been made, and fields where there is no infrastructure. So that's not quite the same thing as opening up Venezuela's oil sector. That would involve broad-based opening to sale of shares in established oil fields and operations. That doesn't seem to be what's happening here. The Venezuelan government here seems to be saying that they're only willing to allow foreign investment if they're going to invest in wholly new production from the ground up. In other words, established oil fields with established infrastructure seem to be off limits. Now, even if they did allow investment into established operations, it would still take a long time to get those back up to snuff, to basically get them operating again at maximum capacity. But if the Venezuelan government is going to restrict foreign investment just to greenfield oil investment, effectively, that's going to stretch that time frame out way longer, because basically that's just building from scratch, and that's not easy, especially in a country like Venezuela that can be very difficult to operate in. Some of the oil that's cheaper to access in Venezuela, say in the northern coast, in the coastal region, basically around Maracaibo, that's cheaper, but that's already established, right? That already has operations and infrastructure. So under the revision, that would continue to be off limits. Most likely, they're going to open up the oil reserves that are often referenced in media that involve heavy crude that have not really been exploited yet. And that's actually, as I understand it, more in the interior of the country. And the interior of Venezuela doesn't have infrastructure that's nearly as good as that along the coast. So if you're an oil major and you're looking at this, it's not going to be an attractive prospect, because either you or the Venezuelan government, or both, is basically just going to have to build new infrastructure in order to facilitate the transportation of all the material and capital equipment that will be needed in order to extract oil in the Venezuelan interior. So that's going to be very expensive and time-consuming. And that's just on top of the overall general unattractiveness of Venezuela as an investment market. So the Venezuelan government here is doing something like what I would have expected, which is that they're kind of giving Washington what it wants, but they're doing it in a way where they're not really giving up anything. Now, it's entirely possible here that they're going to end up opening up relatively more investment in established oil operations to foreign investment, specifically to American investment. But I fully expect more games like this. You know, the Venezuelan government, as we discussed before, is not averse to American investment. They've actually been asking for it. They've wanted to resume oil production so they can make more oil revenue. So they are probably going to be open to American demands to allow more investment. But I think they want to do it on their terms. And I think maybe this is a signal of what that's going to look like in practice. You know, they want new investment to focus on new oil production and to retain full autonomy, or at least majority control in terms of the share of the state-owned oil company over established oil operations. That's probably going to be Caracas's preference there. Whether or not Washington goes along with that, anybody's guess. Trump is famously transactional. He may well be willing to indulge them on that. But if he's not, he may try to apply pressure. And if he does if he does find himself in a position where he feels it necessary to apply pressure on the Venezuelan government to adhere to his demands, then we're going to see an interesting stress test of this new arrangement that Washington is setting up, where they control basically Venezuela's oil exports. Because again, it's not really clear how committed Washington actually is to all of this. And if the Venezuelans start pushing back or dragging their feet, it's possible that this just kind of falls apart. Because it does take resources to kind of maintain a partial blockade of Venezuela, which is effectively what they're doing. And it's not exactly popular in the United States either, not that that necessarily matters to the Trump administration. But if the juice really isn't worth the squeeze here in terms of political return, in terms of some kind of tangible gain in the short to medium term, it's possible Washington either walks away from this or ends up kind of eroding their original demands to something that's much more palatable to Caracas. I'm expecting the latter, but that's just speculation on my part. We'll have to wait and see what it looks like in practice. Let's see, the Venezuelan government did also announce that they're going to create 2 new sovereign funds. One is going to be to pay for social protection, basically for hospitals, schools, food, housing, etc. And the second account is going to be for infrastructure and social development. Infrastructure and social development. And this would seem to be in keeping with the overall plan that Washington's outlined, wherein Washington controls the revenue generated from oil exports and then gives it back if the Venezuelan government does what they want. And it may be that Washington has asked for certain expenditures to be paid for from very specific funds that Washington is going to oversee directly in order to maintain oversight. So it may be that these specific accounts are going to be a part of that scheme. So that would suggest progress on that front. But again, this doesn't require the Venezuelan government to actually offer any real concessions, at least not as of yet. And I would point out on top of all of this, like, they're still making money from drug exports. They obviously don't make as much money from that as oil exports, but it may be that the unintended consequence of losing access to oil revenue in the short term is that they actually end up exporting more drugs in order to try to compensate. The incentive is there anyway. And the Trump administration is gun-shy in Venezuela. They don't want to invade or otherwise occupy the country, or even seemingly disrupt the established government for fear of a government collapse. And that kind of gives Caracas leverage there to kind of get away with the drug trafficking a little bit. That does undermine the credibility of the administration's claim that it wants to fight drug trafficking, but I don't think anybody really took that all that seriously to begin with. But I suspect drug trafficking probably will remain part of the equation for the Venezuelan government. Washington can try to get them off of it, but I don't think it's going to work. That's part of basically trifecta of exports that the Venezuelan government depends on: oil, drugs, and weirdly gold, for whatever reason. Let's see, and one final note. Oh no, a couple more notes. There was a meeting between the president of Venezuela, the sitting president, the so-called interim president, and the head of the CIA. Interestingly. Supposedly, the meeting was aimed at, quote, building trust and communication, unquote. What I read is that they discussed potential economic collaboration, so basically the oil revenue control scheme. And supposedly, the head of the CIA also expressed a desire for Venezuela to, quote, no longer be a safe haven for America's adversaries, unquote. Which is a goofy thing to say, because it really wasn't to begin with. Venezuela was a basket case and remains a basket case. It's more of a danger to itself than it is to the United States. And Venezuela had already, as we discussed last time, been successfully deterred for decades from inviting any kind of substantive foreign military presence on its soil. So there's really not a lot to be gained here on that front. That strikes me as being mostly bullshit on the part of the Trump administration. But apparently that is something that was discussed. So that may be a part of the schedule of American demands whenever that does finally materialize in a coherent form. Let's see, opposition leader Mikado met with Trump. Not much seems to have come of that. Trump doesn't really seem to think much of her. He expresses general respect, but otherwise doesn't seem to be working to actually get her into power, or is otherwise backing her in any substantive way. Mikado did present him with her Nobel Peace Prize.
I heard about that.
Don't know why. She's not going to get anything to show for it. Trump has a pretty strong established track record on that. But I think it kind of is an example of her desperation, her desire to try to push as hard as she can while she can for as much as American backing for actual political reform, while the United States is sort of invested in the Venezuelan issue. She's almost certain to be disappointed, but we'll see. Let's see. Oh, also, the Trump administration went on record and said that it would decide which American oil firms would be allowed to operate in Venezuela. So it seems that they want to monopolize that as well. So it's not going to be just open bidding, where they just kind of where they just decide who has the best bid and lets them have the contract. The Trump administration is apparently going to handpick them. That's what I'm inferring from this, anyway. So that does open the door to a lot of potential corruption, no surprise. It also opens the door to potential retaliation. There was one oil executive who expressed, I don't remember which oil major it was, but their CEO said that Venezuela was quote-unquote uninvestable. And the Trump administration didn't like that and suggested that that company may be barred from investing in Venezuela going forward. So it's not much of a retaliation if the oil companies don't want to invest in the first place, but it does speak to the Trump administration's preferred style that retaliation comes up even in that circumstance. They are very much wedded to this sort of strongman style of politics, even when it's nonsensical. But that's where we are in Venezuela. It's still not really a coherent plan, to my mind, given what I know thus far. That could change as more details come out, but I'm immensely skeptical. And I'm still waiting for the Trump administration basically to get bored of this and just walk away. Might take a month or two, but I don't have high hopes here that they're actually substantively interested in reforming Venezuela in a way that benefits the United States and the Venezuelan people.
A test of attention span and interest.
Well, also, Trump and his administration allegedly almost blew up Iran. So there was that as well.
Allegedly blew it up?
Well, allegedly came close to blowing up Iran. So American military forces in the Middle East were put on alert. Some of them were evacuated from certain bases, I think in Qatar in particular. And so that seemed to signal that the Trump administration was serious about following through on its threat, that if the Iranian government didn't stop killing protesters, that the Trump administration would somehow intervene. Not a full invasion, but maybe some kind of violence targeting regime leadership or security forces. So it seemed like we were on the brink, and then nothing happened. And it's not entirely clear why. I did read an article suggesting that there was intervention by Saudi Arabia and other Gulf governments, which expressed disfavor for any kind of American intervention in Iran at this point. Their fear being that they might actually implode the Iranian government and create a giant vacuum that would create significant instability in the Middle East. The Saudis in particular are sticklers for stability over instability in the region. Contrary to what you might think by the record, that's a whole conversation unto itself. But in general, they prefer dealing with centralized states rather than non-state actors. So even though they're rivals with Iran, the implosion of the Iranian state would not augur improvements in Saudi Arabia's security situation in the region. So they lobbied for the Trump administration not to strike Iran, and possibly that was decisive. Again, it's not entirely clear. Trump himself actually sat down for an interview with Reuters and was asked directly about this. And he denied that it was the Saudis or the GCC countries in general that changed his mind. In his own words, he said that, quote, "I changed my own mind," unquote. Make of that what you will. Regardless, the strikes didn't happen, and the Trump administration did not follow through on the threat. I think Trump himself gave some kind of excuse that supposedly the Iranian government had stopped killing people, or at least the pace of the killing was slowing, something to that effect. It is the case that the protests have died down. That could be what he's referring to. That naturally would correspond to fewer killings. But I don't think it's accurate to say that the Iranian government is killing fewer people now because of intercession by the Trump administration. That seems like a stretch to me.
How many people exactly have been killed? I've read that the figures vary because it's kind of hard to tell.
Yeah, it's impossible to tell for sure. I think the highest number I saw was 5,000, but that's speculative. So somewhere between 1,000 and 5,000, let's say.
What is happening? Are people protesting and the government enforcement just shoot them or something?
I mean, it varies from city to city, locality to locality. Different local authorities have taken different approaches and have exhibited varying degrees of violence. I'm not aware of a general crackdown all over the country, per se. So in some cases, protesters out in public are just met with gunfire. In other cases, besieged militiamen will just kind of ride around in areas where there seems to be strong pro-protester sentiment, and will occasionally just try to intimidate people, beat them, kidnap people. Sometimes people involved in the protests are identified and the state will disappear them or arrest them, presumably where they're, again, beaten or tortured or what have you. Yeah, it's not systematic violence at a national level. It's more localized violence, which sometimes is targeted and is sometimes random. It's all targeted against the protesters and anti-government people, but how it's actually practiced is not necessarily consistent from place to place. Yeah, the only consistent thing is that they're definitely going hard on the protesters. That seems to be the consensus on the part of the government. The government sees this as existential. And the Ayatollah actually already came out and basically said as much, saying that the government needed to defend itself from people who were, in his words, were doing the bidding of Trump. Unsurprisingly, the Iranian government is framing the protests as a foreign plot. I saw some people online kind of joking that the Iranian government and the American government kind of have a similar perspective on protests and protesters as being terrorists and the result of plots. The Trump administration has had some very pointed things to say about the anti-ICE protests in Minneapolis for the past week. Yeah, the Trump administration, I don't think, really sees the protesters as being allies, per se. I think it sees them as being tools.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just using them to pressure the Iranian government, but doesn't necessarily want the Iranian government to actually collapse or be replaced. I think they just want to use the protests as leverage to try to get concessions out of Tehran. In that sense, it's kind of similar to Venezuela, where they don't want full regime change, they just want to pressure them.
What kind of concessions will we want from them?
An end to support for paramilitary groups in other countries, a cessation of support for terrorist activity abroad. Those would probably be the main things. Some kind of rapprochement with Israel to some degree, presumably. Beyond that, probably some other stuff dealing with the nuclear program. Some kind of progress in that vein. Probably a bunch of niche stuff that I can't think of off the top of my head. But yeah, terrorism and the nuclear program are going to be top of mind as far as concessions, I would expect. Maybe the Trump administration would demand some kind of democratization or liberalization, but I doubt it. That doesn't seem to be a priority for them. Mm-hmm. It would be interesting if it worked, because then we would have a circumstance where the United States had a relationship with Venezuela and Iran akin to that which it has with Saudi Arabia, where the United States tacitly ignores human rights abuses in exchange for strategic alignment. That works with the Saudis, it would seem. I don't know if it would necessarily work with the Islamic Republic of Iran and Chavista Venezuela. Both of those governments have ideological reasons to be intrinsically hostile to the United States and its influence in their respective regions. And there's also going to be a great deal of public skepticism. Mind you, the public is not exactly thrilled about Saudi Arabia to begin with. So replicating Saudi-style relationships may not be sustainable in the long run. There may be significant political pressure domestically within the United States to not do that. And if the Trump administration does it anyway, there may be substantive demand to upend any kind of relationships he builds in that vein. The United States does not enthusiastically embrace alliances with states that abuse human rights. It's done grudgingly and with significant domestic political pushback. If it's going to happen, there needs to be significant payoff for the United States. With the Saudis, one of the most powerful countries in the Middle East and the leading oil producer on the planet, offers a lot of benefits strategically to the United States. And so, on account of that, there is tacit acceptance on the part of the foreign policy establishment and certainly on the part of many American voters for that relationship. But the weaker the partner, the less tolerant people tend to be, and the less sustainable relationships of that type tend to be. I hate to go back to Greenland because it is so stupid, but one of the things I was thinking about is that if the Trump administration did somehow forcibly extract Greenland, or maybe even buy it, a new president coming in, possibly with the consent of Congress, or maybe at the direction of a new Congress, could just give it back.
Huh.
Like, there's no inherent reason they would not be able to do that. It kind of speaks to how stupid American foreign policy has gotten to where that is a possible scenario. That is conceivable that that could happen. Mind you, historically, the consensus in the United States, specifically in the government, amongst political actors, has been that, you know, whether you like what a given administration does or doesn't, generally you go along with it in order to maintain the continuity and credibility of the American government in foreign policy. Because if American foreign policy changes with every new president, with every new administration, it significantly undermines the credibility of Washington and any promises that it may make. So all through the Cold War, even though there was a lot of skepticism of certain things Washington did amongst many quarters in American domestic politics, everybody still maintained all of America's commitments in the recognition that it was necessary that the United States government maintain the credibility of its promises in order to establish and maintain deterrence. Since the end of the Cold War, There's not really a pressing opponent like the Soviet Union that has sort of focused minds amongst American politicians. And the result is that that previously long-running norm, that there should be continuity to some degree in American foreign policy between administrations, has pretty well fallen off significantly, if not entirely. So normally, if this were, say, happening during the Cold War, God forbid, I would expect these kinds of threats and actions, if they did result in the acquisition of Greenland, even if they were unpopular, probably Greenland would be kept, even in the event of an administration that came in that disagreed with the context of the acquisition. But now I have no expectation of that. A new administration coming in now really could just pull a complete 180 and undo a lot of what the Trump administration is doing right now, up to and potentially including Greenland.
That sounds like the undoing all the executive orders from the previous president norm that has been fairly recently created.
Yeah, we saw that with Trump in 16, Biden with 21, and Trump again obviously broke the record last year. Now, to be fair, this is a new norm that is entirely established by Trump himself. Mm-hmm. We've not seen whether or not it will perpetuate in a post-Trump world, which is a thing. It's going to happen sooner or later. As far away and alien as such a world may seem at this point, after 10 long years of American populism, there will be a post-Trump era eventually. So it may...
Sorry, you're saying he's not going to unlock immortality and figure out a way to continue to rule?
Knock on wood. Knock on wood. But yeah, eventually he's going to go away, and it may be that a lot of the new norms, in so much as you can call them norms, that have emerged in his administrations do not really survive the test of time. You could see a significant regression to mean after he's gone. I think that's actually pretty likely in the grand scheme of things. But I can't predict with 100% confidence, because that's pretty far away, probably. Even after he's left the White House, after his second term ends, he's still going to be an influential figure in American politics. So we're not truly going to be in a post-Trump era until he's probably dead, since he's presumably not going to stop meddling in politics until then. I'm reminded of Chinese politics, where the elite in Chinese politics are actually just elderly statesmen whom are actually retired but are not fully detached from politics. In the process of rising through the ranks in Chinese politics, you invariably have to build a large coalition of people, basically an extended patronage network. And even after you leave politics, you may actually still be the head of that network, because it may be that nodes within the network are not connected with each other and need the leader to be an intermediary. And that gives an immense amount of power even to a retired statesman. In the 1980s, in China's reform period, there were a whole gaggle of elderly statesmen like this that continued to influence the direction of the party. And people in China actually called them, if I remember correctly, the immortals, something to that effect. I think there was a specific number, like 8 or 9. So like the 9 immortals. And they were guys in like their 70s and 80s that had fought in the revolution and just clung to power. They just would not leave. And, after all the drama of the Great Leap Forward and, the Cultural Revolution, people were kind of tired of them. The reformist period in particular saw not insignificant anti-establishment sentiment in Chinese politics. And that did manifest into sort of an intra-party, I don't want to say battle, but intra-party competition. I'm kind of getting away from the original point. Basically, just old fucks who refused to leave politics continued to kind of weigh on politics in China even after they retired. Trump is going to do something like that. It's really not uncommon for politicians in general in the United States to do that. Look no further than, say, Mitch McConnell or what's his face, Chuck Schumer in the Senate. Like, they're just older dudes who are just kind of hanging out. I don't think they're very good at their job at this point. I was thinking this past week about political culture in the Senate in the United States and how it's a long-running culture that is propagated especially by the leadership in the Senate. But at this point, that sort of way of doing things, that style of politics, which is actually fairly transactional when you look at the legislature in the United States. That's not just a Trump thing. And in Congress, log rolling is a long-running custom. That's not new. And I was thinking that this sort of customary approach that is sort of transactional and strategic, where you try to position yourself where you can get maximum leverage in your log rolling negotiations, this style is kind of past its sell-by date. It does not seem to be delivering results. But the leadership, both on the Democrat and the Republican side of the Senate, again, McConnell's not technically the leader anymore. I think it's Thune now, technically, but McConnell is still going to be influential. He resigned the leadership position, but you'll note that he did not resign his seat, at least not yet. So between McConnell and Schumer, you've got these sort of dinosaurs in the Senate that are propagating that style of politics that has just proven dysfunctional. And they refuse to kind of admit it. Implicitly, they refuse to admit it. There does need to be some kind of internal institutional reform in the Senate to get it functional again. But I don't think sort of the old institutional guard in the Senate is going to allow that. McConnell in particular has painted himself as an institutional actor. He sees himself as a guy who respects and reveres the Senate as an institution. And I don't think he's lying when he says that. I think a lot of people think he's kind of bullshitting and that he is just a sort of purely transactional actor, only interested in his own interest and the interests of the Republican Party as an ideological entity. I don't think that's entirely fair. I think he's not really doing anything new per se in the Senate. He's just taking that culture and style that has been within the Senate from the very beginning of the United States to its logical conclusion. Like, it has sort of been escalating over the past 200 years into this kind of insipid tit-for-tat positional warfare that has reduced the Senate sort of as a legislative body to its current state, where it's, again, barely functioning. And, that rot has accelerated, in particular, over the past couple decades. There's different reasons for that. It's always been a problem, but it didn't really get to be dysfunctional until the past couple decades. But when I do think he's honest when he says that, he's just kind of practicing what's always been done there. That's not new. He didn't do anything new per se, other than to just follow it to its logical conclusion. And but I think my takeaway here is that it's just not working. Like, the proof is in the pudding. Like, the institution just isn't working anymore. And I think the institutional actors who kind of recognize that to a degree don't really see themselves as being the problem, or the Senate's norms as being the problem. I think they see the issue as being hyper-partisanship, which they've discussed before, and maybe also just voters, which they have not discussed before. There is a certain issue with voters just voting in dumb people into politics. There is a certain amount of culpability there that has to be accepted on the part of the broader public. That's a whole ass conversation that hasn't really happened yet, and people get really mad at you when you suggest it is a conversation they should have. But the problem is that until the Senate leadership kind of recognizes their own culpability and the culpability of Senate norms and the lethargy, the institutional stagnation in the Senate, there's probably not going to be substantive change there. Anyway, that's my rant for the episode.
Speaking of random new bullshit, did you hear about the Board of Peace?
Yeah, I heard about the Board of Peace.
So, what'd you think?
So, when the Trump administration mediated the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, part of the deal was that the Trump administration would create a kind of board that would oversee implementation of the peace deal and also reconstruction of Gaza. And my assumption when I first heard about the Board of Peace is that that's what it was. That it was just going to be a board serving purely that function. And I didn't really have high expectations for it. I just kind of figured the board would come in, would mediate further negotiations between Israel and Hamas, and then would probably just be disbanded after it became clear that there wasn't really much progress to be had there. However, the Trump administration has since come out and significantly expanded the rubric for the so-called Board of Peace. So now it's not just going to be about Gaza, although that will be the first thing the board addresses. But apparently Trump has ambitions for the board to address other conflicts, possibly all other conflicts. And what he's announced is that, one, he's going to be the head of the board. And the kicker is that he's going to continue being the kicker. He's going to continue being the head of the board even after he leaves office.
Oh, wow.
So the board will continue to exist past his administration, and he will continue to lead it. Furthermore, countries that want a seat on the board will have to pay a fee in order to keep their seat in the long term. And the fee is something like $1 billion, something to that effect. It's quite expensive. And it's not clear, again, just what the board will do or even what it can achieve. Trump seems to be just offering it as an alternative venue to negotiate peace in whatever conflict he happens to be interested in. But the fact that there's $1 billion fee and that he's going to continue to head it after he leaves office really kind of makes it sound like a scam to me. Like, this is like something you would expect from a Nigerian prince email or somebody cold calling you out of the blue asking for your information. Like, hey, I've got a Board of Peace. You have to pay $1 billion to sit on it, but I totally promise to end whatever conflict that you're involved in if you do so.
Oh, it's a great promise.
It's very sketchy to me. This is really not how traditional international diplomacy or conflict resolution is done. It may be that he's genuine about it, but if he is, that really says something about how he views international relations. Like, it is, I mean, we've talked before about that, like he views international relations as just strong men running the world, and that if you get them all in one place, then they can just hammer things out. So it could be that believing that, this is how he thinks peace can genuinely be achieved. Like, a forum like this would be ideal for that perspective. He's wrong. Like, that's not how the world works. Again, we've discussed that at length many times. I'm not going to retread it again, so I don't bore people here. But if it doesn't end up being a genuine avenue for the negotiation of peace and conflicts, then either this is just another fever dream by Trump that doesn't go anywhere, or it is actually just another scam. And there's certainly been no shortage of scams involving the Trump administration thus far. There's just so many, and they happen so regularly that people don't even really pay attention to them anymore. So yes, the Board of Peace is a thing, but long story short, I'm just extremely skeptical that it's going to achieve anything. Best case scenario is that it serves its original intended purpose and successfully mediates part 2 and part 3 of the Israeli-Hamas ceasefire deal, both of which are yet to be actually negotiated, but their eventual negotiation was part of the original ceasefire agreement. So if the board does that, it'll have been fairly successful. Anything beyond that, I don't know. I don't think it's worth $1 billion.
So you're not gunning for a position yourself?
Sorry, what?
So you're not gunning for a position on the Board of Peace yourself?
My own dumb fat ass, no. I'm not even remotely qualified to be mediating anything beyond a ham sandwich.
But you could be trusted with a ham sandwich.
Potentially. If I'm allowed to eat it, I could be trusted with it. If I'm not allowed to eat it, then I would be dubious. I have ill intentions in that case.
I see. I think you did get a few questions so far.
Yeah, I think we had some from last week, too. My apologies to the people whose questions we didn't get to then. Probably should have ran through them before we exited. Kind of had to cut things short last time on account of the early start the following day.
All good.
So let's see. So from last week, how likely is Pahlavi to eventually step in? Does he have any sway on the ground? For those of you who don't know who Pahlavi is, he's the son of the previous Shah of Iran, basically the Emperor of Iran, who was overthrown in the 1979 revolution that brought the current Islamic government into power in Iran. He has been sort of shitposting online about how he could return to Iran and lead it in a transitional government if the current government does collapse, or perhaps agree to a transition. I don't think it's likely that he steps in, because he's been out of Iran for a very long time, and I doubt that he has any kind of extended network in the country that could act as a power base for him if he did want to step in. Being exiled from your home country for decades on end is not going to be good for your influence in that country. You do kind of have to be there and be involved in civil society, be involved in business activity, be involved in government affairs in your own country in order to kind of build up the network that is necessary in order to kind of propel you to power, if that's what you want to do. But if you're exiled, you can't really do any of that. I think we talked about it a little bit last time. I suspect his real game plan here is more just to make himself known to the Trump administration and to try to get their backing to get him into power somehow. That's not an unreasonable play, but it implicitly assumes that the Trump administration is actually interested in changing the regime in Iran. And as discussed, as with Venezuela, I don't think they're interested in doing that. I think they just want to try to bully the existing government into adhering to their policy preferences, which means that there's not actually going to be a place for opposition figures of one kind or another in Iran. So Pahlavi may be ambitious here. I think he's probably making the right play given for what he's doing, for what he wants to do, but I think he's going to end up being disappointed here. I don't think anything is going to come of that. What would be the reaction to American intervention if it were to occur internationally and within Iran itself? Some argue that external intervention would only strengthen the Iranian regime's position. Yeah, this is sort of the rally around the flag effect argument. Internationally, you would probably see the same reaction you had with Venezuela or with the airstrikes on Iran's nuclear program. A lot of people would complain. Nobody would really do anything. Nobody really gives a shit about the Islamic Republic of Iran. You know, one of the patterns with a lot of the adventurism the Trump administration gets up to is that he tends to target unsympathetic victims. That's one of the reasons that he's able to kind of get away with this. You know, if you were murdering or kidnapping Emmanuel Macron in France or some shit, there would be a considerably more dramatic reaction. But as is, he's basically just picking on borderline failed states like Venezuela or impoverished, violent states like the Iranian government. You know, these are not really strong opponents in the grand scheme of things. And they don't really have strong allies. And before somebody pops in saying, well, what about Russia, China? Russia and China are not allies of Venezuela or Iran. They don't give a fuck. They don't have any kind of mutual defense agreement that would obligate them to come to Iran's defense. Economic ties are relatively mild at best. It's not a strong relationship overall. It is at best what you might call an alliance of convenience, where they cooperate when there's some kind of common goal or common enemy, more likely, as with the United States. But beyond that, none of them are really willing to put their necks at any kind of risk for each other. So the Iranian government does not, in fact, have strong allies. At best, they have partners that will complain on their behalf at an international forum for 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is they're not allies in the military alliance sense, but they are allies in the sense of, we will clap when you say stuff at the world meetings.
Yeah. Moral support.
Yeah. It's a lot less expensive than sending dudes in planes and stuff.
Exactly. So, given that fact, given Iran's diplomatic isolation, given its own violence towards its own people, given its just general unpopularity, probably there will not be substantive pushback if the Trump administration did launch airstrikes. There will be significant rhetorical pushback, but probably not much else besides. As for the reaction within Iran itself, it's kind of hard to say. It kind of depends on what the Trump administration does. If they go for a decapitation strike, a lot of the opposition in Iran would probably be delighted. I don't know if they would really see any substantive change out of that, but they would probably appreciate that. Going after the security apparatus, probably even more popular with the opposition. But you would probably see an even stronger backlash with the pro-government crowd in that case. At that point, they would see themselves as facing a regime change operation from the United States. And in that case, given that they can't really stop the American government from, striking targets in Iran, they would probably then shift over to doing the next best thing, which is to retaliate against what they would perceive as American allies in Iran, that being the opposition. And whatever crackdowns they've been indulging in recently would probably pale in comparison to what they would do in that case. They would probably go very hard. The United States is not in a position to protect the protesters. Washington can blow up the leadership, they can blow up police stations, they can blow up military targets, but at the end of the day, if there's just pro-government besieged militia dudes running around stabbing people, shooting people in the street, etc., kidnapping people, Washington can't stop that. That's asking too much. And if the regime felt like it was facing an existential threat from Washington, they would have little reason to forbear. They would probably go full ham on the opposition at that point. Let's see, if justice for Renee Good is absolutely a hard requirement for millions of people in the United States right now, is there any way for that justice to be carried out via the existing systems? It kind of depends on how you define justice. Because if you mean, will the guy that shot her to death face jail time? No, that's not going to happen, probably ever. So that's off the table, pretty much regardless of context or circumstances. Barring like a full-blown revolution anyway, which I think we all know is not going to happen. If you want to define justice in terms of reforms, in terms of laws or changes in standard operating procedure in ICE, that might serve to mitigate the likelihood of that happening again or preventing it entirely, that's much more achievable. And in that case, you just need to engage in the usual process for making changes in a democratic political system, activism, what would you call it? Organization, I guess, is the word I would use. Activism in terms of trying to get the public on board with a given change in policy, and then organization in the sense that you're collecting like-minded voters and signaling that you have power. You know, that's kind of undersold as part of the activist game. Activism for a lot of people is when you watch a video or read an article, maybe you write a mean comment somewhere, you know, pushing your position, whatever. But that's all part of just phase one, basically, where you're trying to build public support. The other side of that is when you prove that you can mobilize voters. If you're an NGO or, I don't know, a decentralized collective, which is not nearly as effective generally, but if you're one or the other, you need to be able to prove that you can deliver votes in order to try to sway an election. You know, you can have as much activism as you want, but if politicians don't see you as a credible partner, or maybe a credible threat, depending, then they can just safely ignore you. They don't have to care. They're going to be invested in those political actors, be they politicians or NGOs or activist groups or, you know, billionaire donors, whatever. Those are the groups that can deliver the goods, because they can credibly do so. They have an established track record. If you're a new kid on the block, then you don't really have that credibility. So you need to build up your support and then prove in an election, or maybe in polling, depending on, you know, whatever is demanded by the politician that you're targeting, that if they do what you want, then they will benefit at the voting booth. And at that point, you can start seeing substantive legislative action. So that's how you're going to get that kind of change. Now, if you have a third or other definition of justice here, then I don't know. It depends on, again, on what you're looking for. I think whatever you're looking for, I can all but guarantee you that you will not be satisfied. People who want justice for Renee Good are going to be disappointed. Almost invariably. Let's see, do you think the move to Venezuela happened because China is closing in on Taiwan? So is it like a trade-off for the US as they are losing quite a bit from not having Taiwan? So now the move is crude oil. I think that perspective gives way too much credit to the Trump administration, because that would imply a plan. And as we've established and discussed many times, they're not schemers. It's not really, at least in terms of foreign policy, they don't really seem to do medium to long-term planning. So, yeah, I don't think there's any kind of trade-off here. I heard a similar theory about this where maybe this was the result of a trade-off between Russia and the United States, where Russia would get Ukraine and the United States gets Venezuela. You know, I don't think this China version of that is any more based in reality. I mean, for one, Venezuela is not really worth getting. It's kind of a basket case. It's dysfunctional. It's not really a threat, again, to anybody beyond itself. Maybe a minor threat to its neighbors, but beyond that, like, there's nothing substantive there that's really worth trading for in the first place. So why would the United States then indulge in a trade for involving giving up Taiwan or Ukraine? Like, that's a raw deal for the United States. Certainly in terms of Taiwan, which actually is like a very functional democracy that has an economy that plays a key role in international trade. Like, Venezuela for Taiwan makes no sense in that sense. That's not even remotely an equal trade. And I guess I would also disagree with the fundamental premise in the question, which is that, you know, China is closing in on Taiwan. They're really not. nothing that China has done vis-a-vis Taiwan over the past 10 years is really not in keeping with anything they have done in the past 50 years. They've always stated that they want Taiwan back. They've always had military exercises to varying degrees that have been designed to signal their desire to get Taiwan back. None of that has changed. In so much as they have escalated those kinds of exercises that are designed to intimidate Taiwan, they correspond with the increase in the military budget in China. They just have more stuff now and can do more. In so much as they had forbeared in doing so before, it was because the relationship with the United States and Taiwan, but more so with the United States, was better than it is now. And as that relationship has declined, the Chinese government has felt it necessary to more explicitly signal its claim on Taiwan. And I would point out that that is not a tit for tat that China started. That's actually tit for tat that Washington started. It was very much the Trump administration, and also, I might add, Republicans and Democrats in Congress that went out of their way to agitate Beijing in order to look tough on China for domestic political reasons, that instigated that escalation on China's part. So I'm not saying that, China's in the right here and they deserve Taiwan, but I am saying, American political theatrics are partly culpable, probably largely culpable, for the greater Chinese theatrics we have seen in and around the Taiwanese Strait. Taiwan Strait, rather. So I don't think all of this talk about China preparing to invade Taiwan is really legitimate or credible. I have read that Chinese military capabilities vis-a-vis Taiwan have increased significantly over time, and that there may be some kind of plan to take advantage of the gap between current American capabilities and where American capabilities are expected to be in, say, 20 to 30 years, when a lot of investments that the United States has made in the past 10 years are expected to start paying off. That gap is sort of the golden window as far as the relative strength of the US military to the Chinese military. Right now, that balance is still favoring the United States. But over the course of the next 10 to 15 years, the balance will narrow significantly enough that China may be tempted to make a play on Taiwan. But if they wait beyond that, 20 to 30 years after that, the gap between the United States military and the Chinese military will grow again. So that incentivizes the Chinese to really take advantage of that medium-term window, sort of over the course of the next 10, 15 years, let's say, and to make a play for Taiwan. I actually don't think they're going to do it, even in spite of that incentive, because the political culture in China is inherently risk-averse, and there's not really a lot the Communist Party of China can get out of Taiwan by doing that that's going to be worth the risk. There is substantive risk of conflict with the United States, and you don't know how that could escalate. So from Beijing's perspective, it'll be better to continue to press China's claim, one, theatrically, just kind of make it very visible, and two, diplomatically, just to continue to press other countries around the world to recognize China's claim. And then three, economically. China has significant economic influence over Taiwan. Most of Taiwan Strait is with mainland China at this point. And there's a number of economic actors within Taiwan who have significant political influence, who have a significant investment in, at the very least, stable, quiet relations between Taiwan and mainland China. They may actually have an interest in boosting China's control over Taiwan, in so much as it means greater access to mainland China's market. So if you're a mainlander looking at Taiwan, you have every reason to believe that Taiwan's economic dependence on the mainland is only going to increase. And if that's the case, you can just wait them out. You don't have to launch a flashy invasion to get Taiwan. If the island does just end up utterly dependent on trade with mainland China, you could probably just use your own economic influence as leverage to get most of what you want out of Taipei. That's a more risk-averse approach, but it's specifically because it's risk-averse that I think Beijing will be more attracted to it. So that's more my expectation of what they're looking at. So I don't think China's making a play on Taiwan soon or even in the next 10 to 20 years. I think commentary to the contrary is incorrect and overblown in that regard. Just in my opinion, based off of what I've read. Let's see. I've read that Russia brokered the recent peace deal between Israel and Iran. Not sure whether that's been corroborated. I have not heard of any peace deal between Israel and Iran. So this is news to me. If this is the deal that was announced, the ceasefire that was announced after the American strikes on nuclear targets in Iran, I don't think that was mediated by Russia, at least as far as I know. And again, I haven't heard about any recent mediation that Russia has been involved in. So I'll look it up. I'll try to Google it later. But as far as I know, that's not been corroborated. I should probably throw out the usual disclaimer now while I remember. I'm not an expert in everything I talk about on here. I have more of a background in foreign policy and economics. So if I ever say anything wrong, stupid, or biased, please do let me know. If I'm wrong, I want to know more than anybody. We do appreciate the feedback we get on here. I don't read chat while we do this, but I do read it later on after we're done. So I will see the feedback eventually. Let's see. What has the dialogue been in the political circles over the game Pathways? Has there been other examples of state-sponsored video games that can lead to being visited by authorities and mental health professionals for potential terrorist sympathies? Don't think I've heard of Pathways before. Also, I'll have to look that up. You definitely have me curious. I may have misread the question. Let me take a look at that again. State-sponsored video games, huh? Can't say I've heard of it. Yeah, I don't have a satisfying answer. We can try again next week, and hopefully by then I'll have read more about it. But for now, news to me.
Which country is the best? Is it our country? Correct. Which country should you follow no matter what they do? Our country? Correct. This video game is sponsored by the state.
Could you tell what's happening with ICE last week in the US? For those who live abroad, have things escalated? For those who live abroad. Okay. This might take a hot minute. So the Trump administration believes, correctly, that it has a mandate to crack down on illegal immigration into the United States. To enforce that mandate, they have significantly increased the budget for ICE, which is the agency in the United States, specifically in the federal government, that is responsible for enforcing immigration law, up to and including arresting people who are here illegally, so to speak. I know the nomenclature has changed a little, undocumented, what have you, but whatever you want to call it. So their job is to arrest people that are not supposed to be here, who are not here legally. And they got a significant budget boost, and also their standard operating procedure was changed such that they could be significantly more aggressive than they have been historically. Technically, everything ICE has been doing lately, with all of the aggressive raids and enforcement of immigration law, is all technically legal. This is all stuff they could have been doing all along. But they were not allowed to do it because basically every administration since ICE was created recognized that if ICE was aggressive as they could be, in enforcing immigration law, there would be significant pushback from American civil society. Because a lot of Americans are not really comfortable with what they would actually have to do if the federal government were to actually fully enforce immigration law in the United States. Because you basically would need just documentation for everybody who was born here or who immigrated legally to be on everybody all of the time in order to fully have a regime in the United States that actually could significantly crack down on illegal immigration. And also you would need a significant, ICE police presence. You would have to have people on the streets. You would have to have people meddling basically in your business, in your affairs, asking you if you've seen illegal immigrants, if you've dealt with them. It would have to be a whole immigration control regime, basically. And the Trump administration is not doing that because they effectively can't. But what they have done is just allowed ICE to be much more aggressive. And so the inevitable pushback is happening. There are just too many people in the United States who, even if they want a crackdown on illegal immigration, don't want the heavy boot of government on their neck. They don't like being questioned. They don't like having to produce documentation. It bothers a lot of people. Now, that's not to say there's not a lot of people that are willing to put up with that and who don't support what the Trump administration is doing. But it's always been known that this kind of approach would be controversial and would generate pushback. And so that's what we've seen. Whenever the Trump administration has escalated ICE activity in a given region or city or what have you, generally this is what we've seen. Activists and protesters have targeted ICE agents, targeted ICE raids, targeted ICE facilities, etc. And for the most part, it hasn't been too much of a problem. Most everybody has been coloring within the lines, so to speak, of the law. But every so often there's a confrontation and then somebody gets hurt or somebody does something illegal. And that, of course, escalates tensions. All of which is, utterly predictable. We talked about this last time. Everybody knew that this approach would result in escalation of this variety that had the potential to spin out of control. And so previous administrations always forbeared and did not do this, more or less specifically for that reason. Trump administration doesn't care about that norm, and so they're choosing to escalate. And it's not going to serve any greater purpose. This mostly is just partisan. This is mostly done as theatrics in order to appease and maybe entertain supporters. So that's what's happening right now. And I would point out, too, that there's no inherent reason for the Trump administration to surge ICE agents into a given city to target it. They could just do that quietly. They could do that without announcing it at all. But that's not Trump's style. More to the point, you don't really need to do surges like that in the first place. You could just focus on small-scale operations. And it would be fine. But again, that's not sufficiently theatrical for this administration. They have a tendency, when presented with multiple options, to go with the one that is the most optical, so to speak, that has the best optics from their perspective. So the result is that periodically the government announces that they're going to surge ICE agents into this, that, or the other city, and that they're going to fight violent crime, that they're going to go after the drug traffickers. One of the characteristics of this crackdown is that the administration frames it as going after violent criminals. One of the things that's popular with the American public is the idea that a lot of illegal immigrants are in the United States and they're committing crimes, and that the previous administration, specifically the Biden administration, if not other administrations predating Trump, have basically been endangering the American public by not going hard enough on illegal immigration. That there were too many illegal immigrant criminals running around as a result of leniency. You'll note this is logic you can see in virtually any country. This is kind of a rhetorical trick. Maybe not trick, but rhetorical talking point that is used by populists virtually the world over. So the Trump administration, and well, maybe more accurately, the Trump campaign was no exception. They used this tool as well. And lost my train of thought again. I did that last week too. It's always embarrassing.
Escalation of ICE.
Escalation of ICE. Yeah, targeting cities basically is what they were doing. And so they announced that, I'll skip ahead. Long story short, they announced that they were going to flood ICE agents into Minneapolis. They were going to surge agents there and go after Somalis, was the thing that they specifically pointed out. There had been a scandal in Minneapolis recently involving a public scheme supporting, what was it? Childcare, I think is what it was. Basically, I think it was the city of Minneapolis that had set up a scheme whereby the city would fund childcare businesses, basically daycare centers and what have you, to basically act as a service for people with children who found daycare services too expensive. And there had been a conservative activist who had allegedly found endemic corruption in that program, basically, that Somali immigrants in particular, many of them here illegally, again, allegedly, had been setting up fake daycares in order to get money from the subsidy program that they could then keep for themselves. So basically fraud. And that made the rounds on the internet, and then not long after, the Trump administration announced that it was going to flood agents into Minneapolis. So you can kind of see the linkage there between the partisan angle and these sort of surges into given cities. Maybe that's what I was driving to before. The surges are not seemingly linked to any substantive reasoning. There doesn't seem to be any rationale behind partisan theatrics. You'll note that the surges only seem to happen in cities in Democratic-controlled states, and that kind of are known for being bastions of Democrat politics, so to speak. I'm not sure what the proper phrase for that would be. So Chicago, for example, Boston, New York City, all of them have kind of been recipients of these ICE surges. And Minneapolis basically is just the latest. Minneapolis is particularly known, Minnesota as a whole really is known for being particularly left-wing in the United States. So maybe no surprise that they ended up being targeted like others. So that was the impetus for the surge in the first place. So the same thing that has played out in other cities played out in Minneapolis. Activists confronted ICE agents. They were careful not to directly impede them for the most part. Activists have restrained themselves to blowing whistles and otherwise trying to alert illegal immigrants in the area that ICE agents are coming and that they should take shelter or otherwise hide. Now, what happened recently is that there was one such activist whom, and I'm not even entirely sure about the details still, may or may not have been impeding an ICE convoy. Whenever ICE agents go out in operations, they tend to move in convoys since they work in groups. So what happened is that her car was in the middle of the road, kind of at an angle. And I've heard different things. I've heard that she may have just been dropping somebody off, or that she may have been tailing the ICE convoy. That's one thing activists do. They'll get in their cars and they'll just follow ICE convoys around while honking their horn and blowing whistles, trying to, again, alert illegal immigrants in the area that ICE is active. So it may be that she had followed them and somehow positioned herself in front of the convoy, or the convoy turned around, and possibly she was just deliberately blocking the convoy, or she just happened to be there. Again, I have no idea. I have not read details about the circumstances that led her there. Regardless, the ICE convoy was driving down the street and her car seemed to be blocking their path. So the ICE agents in the lead vehicle got out, approached her vehicle, and demanded that she get out. And presumably their logic is that because she was, quote unquote, impeding their operation, that they had grounds to detain her, which technically would be legal. Her argument, near as we can tell, is that she did not believe that she was impeding them. And if you listen to the video, I think she does at one point, as they're approaching her car, tell them to just go around, implying that she's not blocking them and that they can just move around her. Make of that what you will. Regardless, they demanded she get out of her vehicle. She refused to do so. They kind of sparred verbally for a little bit, but eventually she decided to just drive off. And when she did so, there was an ICE agent in front of her. Now, opinions on this are going to differ. The internet has been arguing about this incessantly. So this is kind of a Rittenhouse situation where everybody is just going to see what they want to see. Either she tried to hit the ICE agent and he defended himself, or she nearly hit the ICE agent and he stepped out and responded by illegally and inappropriately using lethal force. Which of those explanations you come down on basically just depends on your predisposed disposition. At least that's how it seems to be playing out on the internet anyway. Regardless, she was shot to death. She died at the scene. And everybody who was critical of ICE and the Trump administration's approach to immigration enforcement pretty much melted down, because this for them was government murder of a dissident. That's how it's been framed on the internet. Government supporters, of course, just frame it as a normal example of a police officer defending themselves against a threat. And if you've watched videos of police shootings in the United States for any length of time, you've probably seen videos of police officers shooting into cars after they seem to be charging them, or even in cases of a near miss. So this is not like some isolated incident. This is not without precedent in the United States. So it's not that surprising that a law enforcement officer would fire his gun into a vehicle that he felt was about to hit him or was trying to hit him. But it's always controversial. There's never been a case where it happened where people just kind of shrugged it off. Almost invariably, there were hearings, protests, a follow-up of some kind, basically. And there are pretty tightly written standard operating procedures for what police officers are supposed to, or rather, when police officers can use lethal force. And some of the criticism I've read of the ICE agent in question is that he was actually out of bounds, basically, that the lethal force that he used was not appropriate given the standard operating procedure he was supposed to be adhering to. My experience with cases like this is that it doesn't necessarily matter per se. It's just going to come down whether or not the officer genuinely felt that he was in danger. And if so, he will probably be given the benefit of the doubt by the justice system. That's my expectation anyway. It could differ depending on the judge and the argumentation, et cetera, and new evidence that comes out. But for now, it's probable that he's going to get off. But the result of all of this is just escalation and partisan tension. And so that's why you've been hearing about it so much over the past week. Either a police officer defended himself from a lunatic activist, or the government murdered a dissident. Those seem to be the two positions at this point.
And people tend to agree with their party alignment that existed.
Yeah, I'll kind of repeat in a truncated form my position from last week, which is that all of this was just utterly avoidable. None of it is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you wanted to have an immigration crackdown, you didn't have to do it with the theatrics. Uh, and if you're going to have theatrics, you can pretty much expect like activist pushback, escalating pushback furthermore. So a confrontation like this in which somebody was hurt or killed was pretty much inevitable, just given how things have been playing out. So you can expect to hear about this again, basically. I don't expect this to de-escalate anytime soon. I don't think the Trump administration feels particularly pressured to do otherwise. And obviously, the protesters aren't going to stop. There was some drama about whether or not the Trump administration would use the, what was it called, the Insurrection Act in order to send the National Guard into Minnesota to suppress, basically, the protests. But eventually he backed off of that, so it doesn't seem likely that it's going to happen.
It's interesting seeing the methods of nonviolent resistance that you mentioned, of like tailing ICE agents, honking horns, alerting people, things like that, where you're not engaging in combat as a protester, you're not trying to blow shit up or attack people directly, but you're trying to thoroughly inconvenience whoever you're opposing.
Yeah, there's a long track record of nonviolent resistance in the United States that's being leveraged to the hilt at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Civil society has reacted pretty strongly to a lot of what the Trump administration has done. The ACLU in particular has been very busy. Mm. Lots of lawsuits.
There was some probably clickbait headlines of Trump saying that there's going to be World War III. Just seems like kayfabe to me, but
that's pretty much always bullshit.
I wouldn't even
he can run his mouth as much as he wants, but he's proven time and again that he's averse to conflict.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know who the combatants would be. He doesn't strike me as a wartime president.
Oh man, that would be interesting. I'm sure that would be a spectacular shit show. Hopefully, we don't have to see the administration under pressure.
Mm-hmm.
He went most of his first term without any kind of big crisis up until the pandemic. And the performance during the pandemic was not entirely confidence building.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see what happens in the second term. I assume people are arguing about the case we talked about.
Yeah. It's fairly civil. No one's getting banned or anything, so they're managing as well as they can.
Yeah, I noticed a bunch of arguments in chat the last time, too.
Mm-hmm.
And people are very polarized about it. Don't worry, it's going to happen again, so you get another chance to talk about it, to argue about it on the internet. I'm sure there will be plenty more opportunities.
I was thinking about it just today, of to see the left and the right in the US like argue so hard against each other. In a sense, it's a step of progress beyond tribalism based purely on identity and your genetics. Like, you're arguing over your beliefs and your customs and practices which is, it's more intellectual than where in the world you came from. It still definitely ends up putting people too much so into categories and missing the overlap between different ideologies, and how people of different ideologies often have some overlapping goals. So there isn't really a reason to just full on hate your neighbor. You might have very different priorities than your neighbor, and you may not support everything your neighbor does, but as long as they treat you decently, then they can be given some space. We'll see if we settle down.
I think that last question was from Dagnip. He was kind of asking about the incident in question from an outsider's perspective. So he may be interested to know some context for ICE. So ICE is an agency, again, at the federal level, and they're not really kind of bound by a lot of the same rules that other agencies are. And that's kind of led to a lot of the tension currently. Because generally, there are pretty strict rules about when police can arrest people or detain people, or what grounds that they can detain people on. What is it? Probable cause, that kind of thing. And the restrictions in that vein that ICE has to adhere to are much weaker. It's kind of an institutional blind spot in the federal government. There's less oversight over ICE agent operations, and the bar they have to clear to detain somebody on suspicion basically of being in the United States illegally is lower than that is faced by equivalent agents in the federal government in other agencies. And so that's why there's been accusations of, them being like a secret police or a Gestapo or, hyperbole of that variety. Basically, ICE kind of has more discretion in how they enforce the law. And so that's led to cases of people who are citizens being detained and then held for long periods of time before being released until their citizenship can be verified, or other cases of them just being very belligerent and otherwise pressuring people into trying to give themselves up or to answer questions or what have you. So it's not something ICE has traditionally exploited, specifically because governments have traditionally been concerned about backlash, but with the current government, that's not so much of a concern. So you're kind of seeing the full extent of the discretionary power that is at the disposal of ICE as an agency. And that in turn has sparked a significant pushback from sort of the libertarian element in American society on both the left and right. It's probably something that should have been legislated before. But as is often the case in American politics, people are easily distracted. And also it had just never really been an issue before. So people didn't pay close attention to that problem. And so reforms went unimplemented, and now we are where we are. Yeah, American government has a lot to commend it for, but there's much to commend the American government for, but it is an old government. Like, this is fundamentally an 18th century construct that we have here in the United States. And we've tried to kind of modify it over time and reform it over time, but given just its sheer size and the difficulty of legislating, the result over time is that it's kind of gotten more and more rickety over the past 200 some years. Honestly, we probably should just have another constitutional convention and just try to make changes, or even a new constitution maybe, but that's practically unthinkable at this point because there's just so much partisanship in the United States that nobody has any faith that such a process would result in a constitution that would have broad enough support to be accepted or implemented. So we're just kind of stuck with the status quo as a result, with all of its flaws. Well, that's all we had for questions.
Thank you, Chad, for your questions.
Let's see, gotta run. Oh, we're doing okay on time.
I've been going for about 2 hours.
Gotcha. Well, Portugal is having an election. Let's see, their incumbent government is socialist. People are kind of tired with the establishment, so they've been flirting with a far-right candidate. It's a pattern that everybody should be pretty familiar with by this point. They just had the first round of their election, and what is it? The moderate socialist candidate ended up coming out ahead, and then second place went to the far-right candidate. Right-wing candidates in the first round in general got more votes. So one could assume that the far-right candidate would win in the second round. But what I read is that he's actually not expected to win in the second round, because even a lot of right-wing voters see him as beyond the pale and will not vote for him. So the expected outcome is that the socialist candidate, Antonio José Seguero, will become the new president of Portugal. Does Portugal have a presidential system? Presumably they do if they're having runoffs. I apologize, I'm not familiar with the Portuguese political system. I have not read about it sufficiently to speak on it with any confidence.
Well, that's the first time I've ever heard someone apologize for not knowing the Portuguese political system. I respect you for that.
First time for everything. Well, the main reason I bring it up, beyond just illustrating that there is sort of this ongoing push and pull battle between establishment parties and populist parties in Europe, one of the, I don't want to say third party candidates, I don't think they have third parties in Europe per se. There's a joke candidate that was running as well. He was a comedian, Manuel João Vieira. I have no idea how to pronounce Portuguese names. What is it?
João, I think. So you say that?
João? I'll defer to you on that. My instinct is always to pronounce it like in Spanish, but Portuguese has completely different rules than Spanish. So that's actually not correct. So this comedian got 1% of the vote. He's not going to be president. But his campaign platform involved promising Ferrari sports cars for every Portuguese and tap wine in every home.
That's funny. Tap wine.
Tap wine. Fancy business. Let's see. Oh. There's a wayward Venezuela note that's not with the others. It's a relatively minor one. The US government announced that it's going to allow Mexico to continue supplying Cuba with oil, which I guess is polite of Washington to not violate Mexico's sovereignty in that way. But it's notable because Cuba has kind of implicitly become part of the Venezuela drama. The American government is kind of pressuring them as well, although more indirectly and implicitly, by cutting them off from Venezuelan oil. But Cuba could procure alternative sources of oil. and Mexico is one of their main alternative sources. So the fact that Washington is allowing them to continue to buy Mexican oil and possibly to increase purchases suggests that maybe the Washington establishment is either not as serious about this as it makes it out to be, as it claims to be, or they're going easy on Cuba for now in anticipation of escalating later, depending on whether or not they do what they want them to do. We'll see. But it is worth mentioning because that is a little bit incongruent with their maximum pressure strategy. I thought it was notable anyway. Oh, did you see the news about the astronaut that was evacuated from the International Space Station?
No, why did that happen?
Some kind of medical emergency. There was some kind of medical emergency on the station, and so he had to be evacuated and sent back to Earth. I think using one of the emergency response vehicles. I think they have some kind of emergency mechanism that allows them to return to Earth quickly, so they had to use that. From what I read, it's the first time they've ever had to do that.
Huh. I wonder what the turnaround was for time.
Sorry, what?
I wonder what the turnaround was for time to go from the space station to a hospital.
Pretty quick. Probably pretty quick. It doesn't take too long to fall through the atmosphere, especially when you're doing it multiple times the speed of sound. Yeah, they probably pulled it off in a couple hours. And probably re-entry was only, what, like 40 minutes of that? If that?
I would just be worried that the space station would need to be over a place where there is a hospital.
I think he was all right.
Okay. You could be dropped pretty fast, but if it's in the middle of the ocean, you're in a worse situation than you were before.
Fair point. Yeah, NASA does not divulge details about the nature of medical emergencies, so we actually don't know what exactly the problem was. As far as NASA is concerned, that's none of our business.
I see. Yeah, I would imagine there would be some, not to say this is the case right now, but certain physical ailments that occur from being in space or a lower gravity environment for a long period of time. And some things that we might not even know about yet. Fuzzy Cord is saying, you get one orbit of the Earth every 90 minutes from the space station. So you don't have to wait super long to change your landing zone. A matter of timing then. Throw the switch, wait, not yet. I'll drop you over the Pacific Ocean. Wait to throw the switch for 45 minutes. Thank you. That would have been bad. We'll go on the island with Tom Hanks.
What else do we have here? We should probably do, well, do you want to do the highlight reel or the trade update?
Let's do, I think we put off the highlight reel a bit. Let's catch up with it maybe.
All right. This is like 3 or 4 months worth of stuff. So some of it will be a little bit dated. Okay. There's so much. Oh, God.
You're free to skim
All right.
as you need.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely going to be skimming for sure. Okay, so a judge ordered the Trump administration not to send either federal troops or National Guard troops to Portland. For those of you who remember, some months ago, there was some drama about the National Guard potentially being sent there to deal with protests. The administration actually ordered them to deploy despite the court order, which the judge did not appreciate. So the judge actually convened a late-night hearing to give a second order forbidding the administration from doing it, which the administration eventually did respect. There was some drama when the Trump administration announced a deal, quote unquote deal, with the Qatari government that would involve a quote unquote Qatari base in the United States, which caused quite the furor on the internet. The United States is not known for allowing foreign military bases or even really significant foreign military presences inside the United States. So the fact that there would be a foreign base got people talking. As it turned out, Trump was mischaracterizing the nature of the deal, most likely accidentally. The deal, in fact, involved basically an Air Force base in the mountain region of the United States, that is to say the Rocky Mountains, agreeing to take on a certain number of Qatari officers so that they could benefit from American training. And it's not unusual for the United States to have deals like that with partner countries. There's almost always a pretty decent number of foreign officers running around different military bases in the United States as part of these kinds of sort of liaison training programs. So there's not, in fact, a Qatari base in the United States, long story short. Let's see, there was an app that was designed to help protesters track ice. The government pressured Apple to pull that from their store. Apple pushed back, but eventually they actually did give in and pull the app. And that was noted as an example of the government pressuring the private sector in an informal way that kind of technically legal, but it's sort of in a gray area. So a lot of people were upset about that. Let's see, the Attorney General of New York State, Letitia James, was indicted, and that was broadly cited as another example of the Department of Justice being politicized and weaponized by the Trump administration. In Letitia's case, it was perceived as retaliation for her role in investigating Trump in previous investigations. It's been too long now, I don't remember exactly what investigation she was a part of. I do remember the Attorney General's office in New York State being involved in investigations regarding the Trump administration committing electoral fraud. Was that what it was? Or it must have been something different, because I don't think they would have jurisdiction for that. I don't remember the long story. Somebody in chat probably does. I'll defer to them on that. Let's see. The Defense Department, changed its rules regarding journalists. So there was a whole shit show about this last year as well. So the Defense Department changed its rules to require journalists that were allowed in, basically, to promise not to divulge any classified material they may encounter. And the government characterized that as a common sense rule, but of course the journalists refused to do so because they saw that as incongruent with their responsibilities as independent journalists. So there's a bunch of talk about journalistic freedom, freedom of the press, etc., and the government being overbearing with journalists. Let's see, oh God. Yeah, this was a dumb one. So this was the No Kings protest last year, in which people were just protesting the government allegedly being basically overreaching, let's say. There's a number of ways you can characterize the Trump administration shenanigans. I'm going to go with overreaching for the moment. So during the protests, Trump posted a meme online on his social media account, I think it's Truth Social, of an AI-generated video in which an airplane piloted by himself dumps excrement on the No Kings protesters. So as you can imagine, that made the rounds on the internet, generating a significant amount of criticism, for one, about his lack of decor, but also about his perception of protesters, which previous governments have generally portrayed as at least being legitimate, even if they disagreed with them. Trump doesn't really believe in that style of politics, so instead we get the AI shitposting. Let's see, another shit show last year. Trump called for the arrest of Democratic lawmakers who had urged members of the military to disobey illegal orders. I think this was in late November. These were all Democrats with backgrounds in either the military or intelligence agencies, according to my notes anyway. There had been some question about the legality of Trump using the National Guard in cities, and so that spurred some Democrats in Congress to come out and politely request that the military not obey illegal orders, which they're supposed to do anyway. That is to say, disobey illegal orders, although in practice it doesn't generally happen that way. That's a whole conversation unto itself. But Trump responded to that in his usual belligerent style, basically implying that they were indulging in seditious behavior and that they needed to be arrested, which once again led to accusations that he was being overbearing and wanted to crush dissent to some degree. There was the pardon of Peter Kuehler. I'm not sure if that's how it's pronounced. He was a Democrat who was jailed for corruption. Trump gave him a pardon. Not really clear why. He was very obviously guilty. But Trump and the Trump administration have been engaging in a number of pardons of figures who had been convicted in fairly airtight cases and had been clearly involved in corruption. And it seems that there seems to be some degree of quid pro quo happening wherein these corrupt figures use some of the proceeds from whatever scams they had been running before they went to jail to somehow compensate Trump. Generally, after they get out, they buy Trump coin or whatever bullshit digital currency has Trump's backing at a given time, or otherwise, somehow direct funds towards his business operations or other schema of whatever kind they're indulging in at a given time. There's been a number of these cases that have happened. I don't have them all in front of me, but this was one of the later ones in 2025. But this case was notable because Peter Kuehler did not kind of pay him back. He announced that he was going to run for election again after being pardoned, and that he would be running as a Democrat, which led to some shitposting from Trump about him not being grateful. Yeah, this is more just a case study representative of the broader pardon story, wherein the Trump administration seems to be trying to build a patronage network out of people who owe him for pardoning them. God, we're not even halfway through. Immigrant vetting proposal. God, I don't even remember this one. Oh, right, this was the social media thing. So there was a proposal made by the Trump administration that would require foreign visitors to the United States to provide social media handles from the past 5 years. The idea being that the administration wanted Customs and Border Enforcement to have access to that so that they could judge whether or not the person in question was a security risk. The proposal also involved visitors, providing all email addresses used over the previous 10 years, names, birth dates, residences, and birthplaces of parents, siblings, children, and spouses. And what else did I have here? Would require all H-1B applicants and their dependents to adjust the privacy settings on all of their social media profiles to public in order for the department to review social media posts. Also, those traveling under visa-free rules would have to fill out a form going forward under the proposal. They would have to complete something called an electronic system for travel authorization form. So that obviously is a much more intrusive process than what the US government usually asks of visitors, and that led to a big outcry, basically. Let's see, Truth Social, oh God. So what happened here is that the Trump administration announced that Truth Social, which Trump and his, the Trump family organization, whatever it is, owns outright, would be merging with an energy firm that is researching fusion energy. Yeah, it's a $6 billion merger, according to my notes. The energy company is backed by Google as well. So there's some ties there. Whether this is some kind of scheme to make money, or if it's some kind of corruption, or if he just genuinely wants to buy into fusion, like, that's not clear to me. I don't think it's become clear in the months since either. I think the firm involved is also involved to some degree in nuclear energy. I think I did read that at one point. So it may be that this is indicative of a effort of the Trump administration to push for greater exports of American nuclear equipment and to, at the same time, profit directly from it. And the reason I say that is because I had noted in the months leading up to this story that the Trump administration seemed to be paying a weird amount of attention to the nuclear energy and its trade negotiations. It kind of makes sense since it is a major export item. It's the kind of thing that you would expect a president to talk about. But I had never seen a president kind of center it quite like he had in trade negotiations. And I figured there was a reason why, and when I heard this story and that the company involved was involved in, to some degree, in the production of nuclear equipment, it kind of made me think that maybe this was the plan all along, that maybe the Trump administration was trying to basically tie his personal business interests into American trade negotiations. Now, that's speculation on my part. I can't prove that, and it could be that it is just coincidence, but it did seem notable to me at the time. The Warrior dividend. This was back when the government was shut down. The Trump administration announced a $1,776 quote-unquote Warrior dividend check for active duty service members. This was meant to circumvent the fact that service members had not been paid on account of the government shutdown. He wanted to try to pay the military anyway because the military is popular in the United States. And so he pushed to give them a check. I don't think they ever actually got it. Somebody in chat, please correct me on that if I'm wrong. Did you note the number? 1,776?
Ah, yeah.
Yeah. He's never short on theatrics. For those of you who don't know the significance of that number, that's 1776, the year the United States declared independence from Britain at the start of the Revolutionary War.
That's not very much money in present terms. If you're trying to impact someone's quality of life or pay them for a job that they've done.
True. But given how many people are in the U.S. military, giving them more than that would probably be beyond the reach of the government's finances. You can't give too much. Let's see. I think we already talked about the lottery scheme suspension. I think this was implemented after the school shooting at Brown University. It turned out that the shooter was an immigrant with a green card, so the administration announced that it was going to suspend the green card lottery scheme. I don't think they have said since whether or not that's ongoing or not, but that was a significant escalation on their part. The headline in my notes for this one is just vanity. So Trump put his name on the Institute of Peace and the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. Like literally, like on the front of the facade of the building, like he had his name added on top of the name of the buildings in question. He also bucked tradition and hosted the Kennedy Center Honors Ceremony himself. That's something the government Sorry, what?
What's the normal tradition?
Normally, the president is involved. He'll be there, and also the executive technically does help fund it, but the president does not himself host it. Trump decided that he was a big enough celebrity that he deserved to do it.
Wow, self-described.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man, did you hear about the FIFA award?
No, what's
that? Chat has definitely heard of this. This made the rounds on the internet. So FIFA, are you familiar with FIFA? Let me ask that as well.
The soccer organization?
Correct, yeah, one and the same.
Okay.
So they awarded Donald Trump an award for peace. And they had a whole ass ceremony for it.
Wow.
Filmed it and everything, giving him this award for peace.
Wow.
He was that year's winner.
They've
so
done
here's
this
the thing.
Every year? What is this a normal thing for FIFA?
It is not. Oh. They have never done that before. They literally invented this award specifically for Trump.
Wow.
So the ceremony and the award, all of it was just an artifice to basically make Trump look good, to flatter him. Flattering Trump is an actual foreign policy strategy utilized by both governments and NGOs of one kind or another.
How would FIFA benefit from this?
FIFA has a big event. I think it's the World Cup coming up in the United States. So I think they're looking to kind of curry favor to try to ensure that goes smoothly. So here's the fun thing. Not everybody in FIFA's leadership knew that was happening. Apparently, some component of the leadership just took the initiative and did that on their own without consulting the actual leadership board. And so after the fact, there was some pushback within FIFA leadership regarding that. Because technically, they do have a rule in place that they're supposed to be impartial in politics. And the award was not especially impartial in the grand scheme of things. Now, of course, FIFA is fairly corrupt, and they've been partial before. That's not new. So in a way, this award ceremony is kind of more in keeping with their actual practice. But I think the issue here more is just that the board was not consulted properly, and that rubbed people the wrong way. I don't have a picture of it for you, but when you have time, look up Trump FIFA Award for Peace, because the award itself has a very interesting design. A lot of people online were joking about how the creator must have implicitly disliked Trump, because it kind of looked like it was criticizing Trump in a way. It almost looks evil, like its hands rising up to hold the globe, and it kind of looks like oppressed people trying to lift the globe off of them almost. It's a very peculiar design for an ostensible award for peace.
Yeah, it almost looks like a villain's magical channeling orb as well. You would have that in your wizard's tower.
Let's see. Mohammed bin Salman, leader of Saudi Arabia, asked Trump to address the conflict in Sudan. Trump says, we'll see. He's open to potentially escalating American involvement, not necessarily direct military involvement, but basically just paying more attention to it. But he didn't commit to anything, and in the months since, I haven't heard anything new about this, so I think this is just another one of those things that faded away after the fact. Let's see, over Christmas, Trump actually answered kids' Christmas calls to the NORAD tracker. For those of you not familiar with this, NORAD is an institution in the United States that is responsible for basically protecting American airspace. It has a whole vast apparatus of radars and other sensors that are designed to track potential threats in American airspace. And 56 70, actually, more like, probably around 70 years ago, a tradition started at NORAD on account of a child accidentally calling NORAD. And I don't remember where he got the number, but he actually did call them. And he asked them about Santa. Can you see Santa? Is he on his way? And so NORAD kind of played along and said, yeah, actually he is. And that came to be an annual tradition where NORAD would release a statement about Santa Claus's position in American airspace.
Huh. That's funny.
So Trump, for whatever reason, decided to interject himself into this tradition and answered a call from an actual child who called NORAD again. And the call, as I recall, was fairly humorous. It's been too long. I don't remember all of the details, but if you look up a transcript, it's very Trumpian. He just has that unique speaking style. I will say, of all the goofy, weird shit Trump does as president, this is like the most innocuous thing. Like if this was the worst he did, we would be in much better stead. Let's see. The Trump administration put a visa ban on what it describes as activists in Europe who are pushing for quote-unquote censorship. These are basically politicians as well as NGOs and some business leaders, I think, that have been advocating for more government regulation of social media. And of course, the Trump administration doesn't like that, not just for ideological reasons, but also because tech companies are major constituents that are kind of, I don't want to say allies of the Trump administration per se, but they have cooperated with him, both during his campaign and during his presidency in 2025. And also, it's just been a long-running objective in American trade policy to go to bat for tech companies, since they are, American. So the Trump administration saw fit to try to leverage, well, I don't want to say leverage, saw fit to pressure Europe by issuing some of these visa bans. These are not like especially high-level people. They kind of are more like mid-level functionaries. So it's not that impactful. I think it's more just generic pressure campaigning on the part of Washington.
I have a funny excerpt from the transcript that you mentioned. Trump says to the child, "We track Santa all over the world. We want to make sure that Santa is being good. Santa is a very good person. We want to make sure he's not infiltrated, and that we're not infiltrating into our country a bad Santa. So we found out that Santa is good. Santa loves you. Santa loves Oklahoma like I do. Oklahoma was very good to me in the election, so I love Oklahoma. Don't ever leave Oklahoma, okay?"
Yeah. Yeah, President of the United States of America.
You're talking to a 4-year-old girl and you're talking about bad Santas infiltrating countries. Crazy.
It is a very entertaining transcript. And there's still more. We can save the rest of this. You do not have to sit through all of this. I leave it at your discretion, because it's about 2 a.m. now. Any preference?
Sorry, what'd you say? I was reading the transcript.
I was saying we don't have to finish the highlight reel today. It's almost 2 a.m. We could just save the rest of it for some other time.
Sure. How much of it did we get through?
Let's see. A little over half.
Not bad. You said we had a 3 to 4 month backlog, so.
Yeah.
Good progress. Well, cool. Do you need to Get some rest. You said you were on a different schedule.
Oh, it's fine. I'm on a slightly different schedule, but it's not so different
Mm-hmm.
that I can't, do this. So I'm good.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the schedule is more just that I have to be certain places at certain times,
Mm.
which is unusual because my schedule for much of the past 10 years has been more chaotic and has very much not been set.
Mm-hmm. At random times you may be called upon, but it is yet unknown. Whereas now you have some routines.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm going to go to the vet on Tuesday. That would not normally be in my schedule, but now it is.
And that's for someone else, right? Not for you.
Correct.
No.
That's on behalf of the relevant relative whom is recovering.
Your relative is an animal.
Not
okay.
quite.
I'm messing with you.
Not quite. No, normally she would do that kind of stuff herself, but can't currently drive, so I'm going to help her out.
Good on you.
Drive down there, probably read my book about China while the vet does their thing. I tend to do more reading when I do errands like that for people.
Yeah, good move.
So whenever I end up being an live-in nurse, which I've done multiple times now over the past 10 years, I generally end up making significant progress on my reading.
That's good. I get good.
So if and when
I get good reading at the airport or on the plane.
Oh yeah, that's always a good one.
Fun fact, chat's just talking about getting a chair. People ask me about my computer chair fairly often. It has a seat cover on it, so it looks newer and better than it is. Underneath the seat cover, it is pretty torn up due to cat damage and so on. And the company that made this, they were tariffed out of existence during Trump's first term, when he was first starting to make plays against China. So I guess they got some of their raw materials from there, and then it became unprofitable to do so. But they sent me a free chair, so they have my undying gratitude, even though they're now working different jobs, no doubt. Rest in peace, OP seat. You tried your best.
Well, hopefully we got in enough actual world affairs here. We kind of spent a lot of time on the Trump administration, but it's kind of hard to talk about world affairs these days without talking about the Trump administration. They are kind of the drama in global affairs. Someday it'll be over. Someday.
But it is not this day.
It is not this day. We didn't even get to the golden battleships.
Golden battleships?
Not literally, but yeah. We'll get into that next time.
I get a StarCraft question. What do you think of the complaint that Blizzard pigeonholed StarCraft 2 into macro play with bigger, safer maps, removing close spawn maps, close by air maps, along with 12 workers and early game defensive buffs? I love it. I've been a big proponent of macro since I figured out how to play Zerg. It's very fun to take lots of bases, and in my opinion, it's the most RTS thing you can do. It's very RTS to make a bunch of workers and take a bunch of bases and upgrade stuff. There are lots of games where you stab your opponent right away. So many games. Fighting games are a great example of that. You immediately start with the ability to strike with full force at your opponent. But RTS, as a game genre, involves some ramp up. It involves map control. It involves like the long game and deciding what areas you want to control on the map. So I get it. Like, I get that some people want to play early aggressive builds, but you can. You can do so up to a master's level, at least. So it's not like cheese has been removed from the game. It just requires really sharp mechanics. So either you get really sharp killing mechanics and you have a good procedure for ending a game quickly, which can be done with the current meta, or you try to get some kind of economic advantage and hit a power spike later on. But yeah, I love macro. Big fan. Chat saying the golden battleships have a +12 to attack power and +5 to armor compared to regular battleships. That's good. That seems like a pretty strong ship.
If it ever gets built.
What about other races in StarCraft that have a harder time taking and defending bases? Terran and Protoss actually have ridiculous busted macro as of Legacy of the Void. The effect of Chrono Boost is so strong now that many Protoss players are trying to outgreed Zerg. There are quite a few Protoss in GM who will take a third base at a very similar time to Zerg and just spam probes. So Protoss is doing it, and then Terran on top of that can go 3 CC very early, and 3 command centers, 3 orbitals with mules gives you insane income. And a lot of Terrans will play a late turtle game because Terran can make so much money. So all 3 races in StarCraft can make a shitload of money and be played macro. Chrono is stronger now than it was in the past. There have been phases where Chrono was just like an always-on thing and you chose what was being boosted, but it was a slow boost. Now it's a pretty fast boost. The game's in a good spot. Last night I just watched the best of 5 between Raynor and Clem. So it's Zerg versus Terran, God's favorite matchup. And it went all the way to game 5. They had very good games. They're both considered some of the best of their faction as well. The best or second or third best. I also went to a local town event yesterday in South Dakota, and it's very interesting to, after living in Los Angeles and the Seattle area, being in a very firmly conservative region, and how the banter is, as you would expect, and very different from on the West Coast. So, yeah, fun human observation experiment. I don't typically take political stances as one of my earlier conversation items. That's not really what I'm super interested in knowing about a person in most cases, but many people who are excited about it will tell you what they believe. And that's always fun.
I'm sure they're very insightful.
It's funny. I don't know about insightful. It's like demographic B sucks, demographic A is the best. Or some variation of that. The other side is stupid. People say that. And it doesn't really matter which side you're on. There is really good media for, well, not good, but there's very effective media at reaffirming that notion. Outgroup dumb. In-group smart. Outgroup evil. In-group righteous. Outgroup whiny. In-group tough.
Regrettably so.
Mm.
They have gotten quite a bit of practice over the generations.
Mm-hmm. And now you have a direct line to every user with social media, and everyone has a phone. So there's quite a lot of immediate reach.
Yeah.
I remember back in the 90s when my dad had to get his news from the newspaper. He would read the newspaper. It was the Dallas Morning News.
Wait, did he actually read the Dallas Morning News?
He read the Dallas Morning News. Yes.
Huh. Doesn't have a whole lot of circulation. I'm always surprised when I hear somebody reads it.
Oh, I don't think he still does, but he did when we lived in Texas.
Oh, yeah.
I think they served them to our neighborhood. Like, it was just in the suburbs. I don't remember if it was like a paid subscription thing to get the newspaper. It probably was.
Yeah, it would have to be. They sometimes throw out like a free sample now and again, but yeah, if it was regular, it would have been subscription.
Mm.
I actually had one for a while. long time ago. God, like 20 years ago. Yeah, they used to throw it on the driveway. It's old school style.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I had so much newspaper. I had no idea what the hell to do with it. I think I ended up giving it to my mother to use as kindling.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's what you use it for. Pieces of paper burn really well to start. They burn fast, so it's not for a sustained fire, but getting it started, you can just set the lighter on the newspaper and put the newspaper under the wood. Bada bing, bada boom. You got it. Yeah, I was thinking it would be funny to see sort of this like clickbait, really fake drummed up media, and how that's not exactly a new thing. Like, there have been bullshit tabloid journalists basically for all time. I would guess there have been Greek things like this back in the day. But like old-timey US tabloid journalism will be funny to see. Like all the different bullshit they tried to propagate and certain people believed in.
Yeah, I'm trying. I have in my notes. I don't remember if I told you, but I've been intermittently researching early 19th century American political history. And since you mentioned that, it kind of made me remember there was one newspaper in the early 19th century which was explicitly partisan and was used by the Republican Democrat Party, as it was called at the time. Or was it Democratic Republican? No, regardless. That outlet was basically just their mouthpiece. And I was kind of surprised to read about it because I hadn't really thought that in the early 19th century there were a lot of publications that were widely circulated throughout the United States. But apparently there were, and that was one of them. It was Global something, Global Inquirer, something to that effect. Oh, there's too many. I don't have it in front of me. But yeah, that idea of partisan media has deep roots in the United States. You can trace that all the way back to the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a very natural progression of people who say stuff, even if you didn't start out as being a mouthpiece for the party. If you say stuff that's very much in favor of it, then they can magnify your message and you make more money. So there's a direct monetary incentive to shill for some group if they have power and they can give you power.
Was it the Globe? Let me check. No. That's going to drive me crazy. Yeah, the editor of the paper I'm thinking of was a close political ally of operatives within the Democratic Republican Party. Republican Democrat Party, that's what it was. I'm always getting them mixed up. Yeah, he ended up losing control of the paper, actually. I think from government pressure, no less. Yeah, politics in early post-independence America were pretty wild. The more I read about it, the more fascinating it gets. I may go through my notes with you on here at some point, if the occasion arises.
Gotcha.
Well, is there anything else you wanted to get to?
I don't really know of anything else that comes to mind. I have successfully been hooked by the Reddit algorithm on a subreddit called how is it living there? And it's very fun. People just post a picture of a map and they draw a circle somewhere and they say, how is it living there? And you get people who have either stayed there for work or they actually live there. And it makes me think about parts of the world that you often wouldn't have just go into your news feed, like different random islands, or recently someone circled DFW and asked what it was like there. And it's funny when they choose a place that you have lived in to see what other people's takes on it were. Because some people have a favorable take on DFW. Other people say it's a concrete salesman's paradise. It kind of depends on who you ask. But it's a huge metroplex, so that would be a larger area to assess. But then sometimes they'll ask, like, what's it like living in Micronesia or the Falkland Islands or the Isle of Man or something like that. So that's been pretty fun.
The Isle of Man.
Yeah.
I think I had a relative who was killed near the Isle of Man during World War II. It was on a minesweeper that got blown up. I think it was by a submarine, actually. Yeah. Sort of like a great-grandfather, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really know him. I think they have races there, don't they?
Yeah, I think maybe F1.
Right. And I think they have their own government as well. It's part of the UK, but they kind of have a funky legal thing there regarding its status. So it's kind of like Guernsey and Jersey in the English Channel.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with those?
No.
So Guernsey and Jersey are two islands in the English Channel. They're part of the UK, but they're not quite governed directly by the British government. They kind of have their own devolved governments that sort of manage their own local island affairs. So they're more autonomous than a locality in the mainland UK would normally be. Yeah, I don't remember the technical designation for it. I don't think it's overseas territory, but it's something like that. And Isle of Man shares that status. Fun fact, did you know Guernsey and Jersey were actually taken by the Nazis in World War II?
I did not know that.
Yeah, that was the only part of mainland British territory that they were able to successfully take. So you can actually see pictures of British policemen, like the British Tommies, walking around, having their picture taken with Nazi soldiers. It's kind of weird and jarring to see.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the historical impression is that the Brits shut them out of England in general, aside from bombing.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess they did take some territory.
Yeah, a little bit. They're very, very small islands. It's not saying much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there was a British TV show, actually, that portrayed life under occupation there.
How long did they have them?
I want to say they took them in 1940. France would have been 40, so then Sea Lion would have been like late 40, early 41. So let's say late 40. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, thereabouts. Want to say like 4.5 to 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
It was a while. It was probably not very comfortable for the British, anyway, living there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think excuse me. I think technically Jersey, it's Guernsey and Jersey Island, and Jersey Island is actually what New Jersey here in the U.S. is named after.
to the island. Just pulling up the map here so I can see where it is. Oh, I got at least one nice beach. Oh, that's really close to France.
Oh, yeah.
Ah, yeah, so is Guernsey. That makes sense, yeah. Okay, that's pretty far from actual UK. Well, the mainland part. Channel Islands. They're pretty big. They don't really show up on a map when you're zoomed out, though. But
yeah, people tend to overlook them.
Yeah, they're large enough to have quite a few cities in them, or at least towns. Elizabeth Castle. Rocco Tower. There's another castle. Nice. Yeah, I would guess that it would be difficult to get just normal supplies and be able to travel normally if you're under occupation.
Yeah, and conditions got worse as the war went on because the Germans were monopolizing most of the food and other supplies for their war effort.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the blockade by the Royal Navy and the American Navy, they experienced worse and worse shortages over time.
Mm-hmm.
So Guernsey and Jersey definitely felt that, so to speak.
I'll put it on stream real quick for chat. It's just to the west of Paris, basically. A little bit north and west of Paris, off the coast of France. Much closer to France than to England.
Mm-hmm.
French food is very good. Very, very good. You've not been to Europe, have you?
Can't say that I have.
You would like the food in France and Italy. The food in the UK was relatively weak. Unless you're in London having Indian food, then you're in the good stuff. They've got legit good Indian food there. It's a big enough city, they probably have some of everything. Jersey and Guernsey are both breeds of cattle as well, presumably from those islands. Ah, maybe. Jersey cows, Guernsey cows.
I don't know that I've ever heard anything to that effect, but it could be.
Jersey cows are dairy cows, I think. Well, cool. Always enjoy a little trivia and food conversation.
Oh, my pleasure. It's more fun than talking about the Trump administration for the umpteenth time.
Yeah. Well, we can always fall back on Godzilla. That's a trusty one. Got Godzilla. I just finished My Hero Academia. That show has completed. So, yeah, got to see the whole thing. It's pretty good. It's not I wouldn't call it a masterpiece one where it's like, oh, you have to see this. This is my top 3. It's probably a top 10 show for me. It's good. Some of the tropes that it uses have been used in other stuff, so it doesn't quite hit as hard as when you see it the first time. But overall, pretty good. Good animation. Fun characters, fun story. Jujutsu Kaisen is the next anime that I'll catch up with. The new season of that one started. That one's a bit more adult and violent and scary with how it's drawn and the situations and so on. So I think I like Jujutsu Kaisen more. So we'll see how
I've
that one
heard
goes.
good things about it. Never seen it myself, but the reviews seem to be positive.
Yeah, it's very good. Not quite as big of a budget as Demon Slayer. That one has a very, very fancy animation. A lot of the characters in Demon Slayer are kind of childish and whiny, though, so it's more annoying to watch. Free Aaron started season 2. That's a very good one. Very slow anime, but good. So you have to be willing to watch something that's not combat heavy. Some people, they lose patience.
Yeah, I did really like that one. I watched that on your recommendation. Thank you, by the way.
Nice, good. It does have some of its violent moments, too.
Yeah, but they're never centered like you would see in a lot of other shows.
Yeah, the episode is not centered on the fight itself, usually.
Mm. Yeah, it does a pretty good job sticking with its theme.
Mm-hmm.
Very much a show for disaffected middle-aged people.
Yep.
I appreciate that.
Finally, they make stuff for us. Yeah, that one and Kaiju number 8. The main character in that one is in his 30s, and it's like, yeah, it's us. We're in a show. That one's got some Godzilla-ish themes in it. Just with how the monsters look. Fairly straightforward in the story. You're 40? That's 30 adjacent. You're still young.
Ugh. Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that.
People sometimes hit their physical peak pretty late. I would say leave some hope for a routine that causes you to mount your discipline in such a way that hasn't happened in the past, in a way that current you can't quite envision, but future you may do.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it happen many times. My dad's in better shape now at 60 than he was when he was 35, so it was just due to watching too many P90X videos.
Whatever works.
Yep.
I'll give Thunderbolt Fantasy a try. I don't think anybody I've recommended it to ever has, understandably so. But I will not stop shilling for it.
Thunderbolt what?
Thunderbolt Fantasy. I'm throwing it out there again.
2016. Huh. Have I watched the Bleach anime? No. Isn't that one of the really long ones? The art style for this one looks really different.
It's puppets. Specifically Taiwanese puppets.
Huh.
Yeah, I feel like people see the puppets and they get turned off. But it's actually a very well-written show. It's actually one of the better written shows I've ever seen.
We want to make an epic story, but we don't know anyone who can draw. Oh, well, let's just use puppets. Okay, fine.
Yeah, the background is that the lead writer, actually Japanese and normally writes anime, just kind of happened across a stall at an exhibition where the puppet company kind of was showing off some of their skills and some of their work, and he was thoroughly enthralled with them and decided he wanted to do a project with them. And that turned into Thunderbolt Fantasy. Yeah, the Taiwanese company had done projects before, like for TV and stuff, but they had never teamed up with like a big name Japanese anime type writer. Like that was new for them. So they put a lot of money into Thunderbolt Fantasy, more so than they'd done in their other projects. And it paid off pretty handsomely. Like it's a very well made show, it's well put together. But people just can't get past the puppets. Nobody's watched it.
I've watched the Muppet Movie 2 and Team America World Police. So I've seen some puppet movies.
There you go. God, I saw that in theaters when it came out.
Yep.
Team America, and
Yep.
takes me back.
Well, cool. Well, excellent show this evening. Thank you very much, chat, for your participation. Thank you, Fuzzy Gold, for handling questions. And thank you, Agent Smith, for your time. We'll see you on the next episode of Well Discussion with Agent Smith.
Yeah, thanks again. Always a privilege. Talk to you next time.
GG.